Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Paul Harris and I am president of the City Club's Board of Directors. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Rhee, founder and chief executive officer of StudentsFirst. During the last several months at the City Club of Cleveland, several educators have shared their views on the transformation of public education in the United States. One theme during those prior addresses has been that the status quo is absolutely unacceptable and that failure to make educational reform a top national priority will have consequences for our nation's competitiveness in a global economy. Today we are pleased to welcome an educator who has demonstrated a commitment to challenging the status quo in the educational arena and to putting students first. Ms. Rhee was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and raised in the Toledo, Ohio metropolitan area. She earned her bachelor's degree in government from Cornell University and a master's degree in public policy from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She worked for 3 years in Baltimore, Maryland as a teacher with Teach for America. In 1997, Ms. Rhee founded the New Teacher Project, an organization committed to bringing excellent teachers to classrooms across the country. In furtherance of that objective, Ms. Rhee partnered with school districts, state education agencies, nonprofit organizations, and unions to reform teacher hiring practices. Under her leadership, the project placed 23,000 teachers in schools across the country, and I understand that the placement figure today is up to about 40,000 or so. Very impressive. In 2007, she was appointed chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools, a position she held until resigning in October 2010. As chancellor, Ms. Rhee took decisive, difficult, and sometimes controversial actions, including closing schools, reforming teacher compensation, and lessening seniority protections for teachers. In December 2010, she appeared as a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show and announced the formation of StudentsFirst. This announcement drew plaudits from many who were pleased to see Ms. Rhee continue to play a lead role in educational reform. StudentsFirst has an ambitious objective to which Ms. Rhee devotes her passion, talent, and cumulative experiences in education. As stated at its website, StudentsFirst's mission is, quote, to build a national movement to defend the interests of children in public education and pursue transformative reform so that America has the best education system in the world, end quote. In addition to her leadership position with StudentsFirst, Ms. Rhee serves on the advisory boards for the National Council on Teacher Quality, the National Center for Alternative Certification, and Project REACH of the University of Phoenix School of Education. I'm very pleased to present on behalf of the City Club of Cleveland, Rhee, founder and chief executive officer of StudentsFirst.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to start by saying that I feel a little remiss because I am an Ohio girl. I went through my whole K-12 education in Ohio, but I did not realize living a few hundred miles away that St. Patrick's Day was such a big thing in Cleveland. See, we don't have a parade in Toledo during the middle of the day on St. Patrick's Day, so if I had known better, I would have worn my green, so I apologize ahead of time. I want to thank the City Club. I want to thank the Greater Cleveland Partnership for having me here today, and I also want to recognize Bob Summers, the director of the Governor's 21st Century Learning Initiative, just because I think that we are hopefully going to engage today in a really vigorous and interesting conversation and debate about education reform, but I do believe very strongly that Ohio is poised in a position where you can really be at the forefront of this movement for the next few years. So looking forward to the discussion. I'm going to start off by giving you a little context for the rest of my talk and the sort of Q&A that we'll go through by telling you a little bit about my experiences in Washington, D.C. Because that grounds a lot of my beliefs and sort of a lot of what drives me today. In 2007, in June of 2007, Adrian Fenty, who was the then mayor of Washington, D.C., he was the youngest mayor ever elected. He was the only mayor who was ever elected in the city who won every single precinct in the district. He sort of swept into office, and the first thing that he did when he took control of the city was that he introduced legislation that would allow him to take over mayoral control of the schools. And so June 12th, 2007 was his first day of having taken control of the schools, and then he announced me as his pick for the city's first schools chancellor. It's stunning the city because I was absolutely the opposite of what people both wanted and expected in the city's first chancellor. I was a 37-year-old Korean girl from Toledo, Ohio, who had never run a school, much less a school district. And people across the city were thinking, Adrian Fenty has lost his mind. Why does he think that this is the woman who is going to turn around the lowest performing school district in the country? So that was my auspicious beginnings. And it was, to give you a little context, I inherited a school district that most of the people in the city and across the country knew by reputation as being the lowest performing and most dysfunctional school district in the entire nation. But just to give you some data behind this, I'll share with you a few statistics. First of all, when I took over the school district in 2007, if you were a 9th grader entering into high school in our system, the chances that you would graduate from college within 5 years would be about 9%. If you were an 8th grader in our city's schools, only about 8% of you would be performing at grade level in mathematics. 8%, which means that 92% of our young people did not have the skills and knowledge necessary to be productive members of society. We had an achievement gap in our school district between where the white students were performing and where the African American students were performing of 70 percentage points at the secondary level, 70 percentage point gap. And potentially the most disheartening data was about our little ones. And basically what that data said was that when the children came into our system, they were about on par with kids who looked like them in other urban jurisdictions. So not with the kids out in the suburbs. We already knew that they were far behind them, even when they just started school, but with kids who looked like them in cities like Cleveland or Compton or Philadelphia across the country. The problem was that the longer they stayed in our system, the worse off they were. So by the time they were in the 3rd grade, they were far below their urban counterparts. And this was an interesting statistic, which is that by the time they reached the 4th grade, the poor black 4th graders in New York City were 2 full grade levels ahead of the poor black 4th graders in Washington, D.C. So for everyone who wanted to blame the low achievement levels, the low academic achievement levels of our kids on poverty and on single-parent households and violence in the community, the last time I checked, the poverty in Harlem did not look all that different from the poverty in Southeast Washington, D.C. But the kids in Harlem were operating 2 grade levels ahead of our kids. So that gives you a sense for what we face, because essentially it was almost as if we were telling kids, you're better off staying home every day than you are coming to school in our system where you are sure to be falling behind. So this is the system that I inherited. We kind of went at it, and it was interesting in lots of ways, but one of the first things that I noticed as I started traveling around the city, and I would go to places like this and give speeches to the Rotary Club and this and that, and inevitably, after I would give my speech, I would have people come up to me and they would say, we really like you, Chancellor Rhee. You are enthusiastic, you're really mission-driven, seems like you're really hardworking, but you are not going to be successful. And I'd always say, gee, thanks. What? Why do you think that? And they'd say, because schools are a reflection of the communities that they're in. And as long as we have the economic disparity in this country that we do, we're also going to have the educational inequity that we do. See, you have the society where there are some communities that are very wealthy and there are lots of resources and lots of engagement in those communities. You will always have great schools. And then you will have communities that are not as wealthy. They have fewer resources, less people engaged and involved, and in those places you're going to have some not so good schools. That's the way capitalism and democracy work. Live with it, right? And I never subscribed to that belief, but I could never really sort of figure out how to articulate to people why there was something else that I believed in. And it wasn't until about a year or so into my tenure, I had the good fortune of meeting Warren Buffett. So first of all, never in my life, people, did I think that little old Michelle Rhee from Toledo, Ohio, would ever get to meet Warren Buffett. But there I was one night in Omaha, Nebraska, having a steak with Warren Buffett. And, we're sitting there, and he said to me, Michelle, it is very easy to fix the problems in public education in America today. And I looked at him and I said, super. Why don't you tell me what that is so I can run back to D.C. and do it? And he said, well, all you have to do is make private schools illegal and assign every child to a public school by random lottery. So think about that for a minute. Because in D.C., what that meant was if we made every CEO's child, every ambassador's child, every congressman's child, and the president's 2 children, right, all got assigned to a random DCPS school by lottery, which means that a huge percentage of them would be going across the river to Anacostia every day for school, I guarantee you that you would never see a faster movement of resources from one side of the city to the other, as you would in that circumstance. And I also guaranteed you that we would very quickly have a system of excellent schools. So the question in my mind is not, is it possible to ensure that this can happen for children? That's not the question. The answer to that is yes. The real question is, do we, as the adults in this system, have the wherewithal that it would take to make the incredibly difficult decisions necessary to make that a reality for every child in our society? And the answer to that question has been a resounding no. We have not been willing to make those decisions. So that's kind of the context in which I started my job, and it was an interesting one. I did not have the power to close down and make illegal private schools, nor did I want to, and so I sort of came into the job, and one of the things when I first came into office that people were constantly saying to me was, you have to figure out where the money is going, Michelle, because we spend more money per student than almost any other jurisdiction in the country, and our results were at the absolute bottom. And everyone was saying, where's the money going? Because the schools did not feel rich. They did not feel like we were spending the most money in the nation. So everyone was like, where's the money going? So I sent my folks out, and I said, follow the money, figure out where it's going. It was interesting. One of my special assistants came to me early on in the first few weeks and said, so this is a really interesting thing that I found. He said, do you know that we spend several $100 million a year paying the tuition for special education kids to attend private schools? And I said, well, that sounds a little crazy. Why is that happening? He said, but wait, I got something even crazier. He said, we spend about $90 million a year transporting those kids to the schools. So I'm doing the math, 90 million. It came out to be about $15,000 per kid per year to transport them to the school. And I thought, okay, I mean, $15,000, you could buy the kid a Saturn the first year and a driver for the Saturn every year after that. I said, I don't know anything about running bus routes, but I know I can do it for cheaper than $15,000 a year per kid. So come on, this is great, and we're going to save money. He said, no. What you don't understand is we have done such a poor job of getting the special ed kids to their placements that now it's been taken over by the state. There's a court-appointed special master, and he's allowed to spend as much money as he wants as long as he gets the kids on time. We have no ability to control the costs. I mean, this is the situation that we were facing. So, we started digging into this, and he said, let me just give you an example of the madness. He said, I was, looking through the files of these children that we're sending to these private schools and we're paying the tuition. He said, and I found an example of one employee that we happen to have, and she made 2 mistakes. On one kid, she didn't have a meeting she was supposed to have, and on another kid, she didn't fill out a form she was supposed to fill out. And because of those 2 egregious errors, she actually cost the district a tremendous amount of money, because both of these kids ended up getting sent to a private placement that cost the district $227,000 per year per kid in tuition. So I'm thinking, this is crazy, right? So I got to meet this lady. So my special assistant calls the woman and says, ma'am, we need you to come to a meeting at the chancellor's office tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And she says, well, I need to check with my supervisor on that. He said, ma'am, the chancellor is your supervisor. She is everybody's supervisor. And she said, well, fine, okay, but I'm going to bring my lawyer to the meeting. He said, bring whoever you got to bring, just come. So the next meeting, the next day, she shows up, and I walk in, and I said, so I understand you had a question about who you report to, whether you should come to this. She said, no, I'm sorry, I just got a little freaked out. I said, okay, that's okay. So I had the files in front of me. I said, you know, this kid, you didn't fill out the form, this kid, you didn't have the meeting. Help me understand what happened. Because you cost this district nearly $500,000 with these 2 mistakes. And she looked at me and she said, well, you need to understand that I'm a very busy person. And I have too much to do. There's so much that has to get done in any given day. I've got too many kids in my caseload. So things are going to fall through the cracks. That's just the way that it is. And I looked at her and I said, no, you need to understand that if you believe this job is too big for you, then you need to go find another job. But if you are going to take the paycheck home every other week, then you have to take responsibility for doing everything within your job purview and doing it well. And she said, but that's not fair. And literally, it was this mentality, and I saw it over and over and over again with people that I met throughout the central office, of people not taking responsibility for the quality of education that we were providing for kids. And so I did what I think lots of managers in turnaround situations do. I started firing people. And that didn't last very long. So a couple weeks after all this started, my then general counsel sort of ran into the room one day, my office, shut the door and said, Chancellor, you have got to stop firing people. And I said, why? If people aren't doing their jobs, then we move them out and we bring in people who can do the jobs. And he said, welcome to D.C. public schools, where we never fire anyone. And I said, you know what, I feel like you're exaggerating. I've talked to lots of people in the city. They're telling me that there is a way to do this. I don't want to break any rules or regulations. Just tell me, what do we do? How do we remove these people if they're not being particularly effective? And he said, well, there's only 2 ways that you can fire an employee from the school district. I said, okay, give me the first way. And he says, you have to have done something egregious. And I said, well, that's perfect, because everybody that I'm talking about is egregiously incompetent. And he said, no, that doesn't count. He says, you have to basically have hit a kid, and we have to have the videotape to show it, because 5 teachers and the principal seeing it is not enough. Or you have to have stolen money from the district, and we have to have the bank receipt to prove it. But short of that, nothing counts as egregious. I said, okay, that's not good news. Give me the second way that I can fire someone. And he said, well, you have to show a recurring pattern of ineffectiveness. And I said, well, these people did not magically become ineffective the moment that I walked in the door. Clearly, we should be able to show that there is a pattern. And he said, that's what you would think. But what you don't know is for the last 10 years in the central office, nobody's received a performance evaluation. So in order to meet the legal letter of the law of showing the recurring pattern, you have to show the documentation. And we don't have any documentation, so you can't fire anybody that way either. And I said, okay, so tell me, what am I supposed to do then? And I have all these people, and they're not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. And he said, well, you can do what we normally do. We send them down to the schools. And I said, are you kidding me? I'm trying to get these people away from children, not put them closer to them. So in the short term, I decided, you know what, I'm going to send some of these people home. Because think about it. If they come to work, I pay this lady $40,000 a year. In 1 week, she makes 2 mistakes that cost me $500,000. I'm better off letting her stay at home for a little while as a cost-cutting mechanism than coming into work every day. So we went through this whole process, and I talked to the mayor, and I said, sir, we are in this position, and it's a very difficult one, but the difficult position is made impossible if I don't have the authority to bring in the team that I need to do the work. And he said to me, well, if you don't like the rules of the game, then you change the rules. So we introduced legislation to the city council that would allow us to make all central office employees at-will employees. And that was sort of firestorm number 1 that brewed. And it was very interesting during that whole debate because, we had probably the most interesting day I had in the whole 3.5 years that I was was in that job was the day that we had the city council hearing about that legislation. And we had scores of people, coming in and testifying and leaving. And during the entire, I think it was 14-hour-long meeting, you heard very, very little talk about children, about schools, or student achievement. All of the talk was about adults and job security and protections. And, I got this, question where somebody asked me along the way in the process, don't you believe, Chancellor Rhee, that an ineffective teacher could be made better through professional development? And I said, perhaps, but let us not let children languish in their care in the meantime. Because I can tell you that if my 2 kids were in the DC public schools, and I can tell you that if I showed up for school on day 1 and the principal said, here's Olivia's teacher, guess what? She's not so good. But we are going to take this year to professionally develop her to see if she can improve her practice. Right? Olivia and her 23 friends may not learn how to read this year, but we think that's the right thing to do for this adult. I would never accept that for my child. Nobody in this room would ever accept that for your children. But we have thousands and thousands of children in cities across this country who don't have the adult advocates in their life, who know how to navigate through the system and make sure the right teacher and that sort of thing. So they literally are languishing in these classrooms every single day. And especially when we know the statistics, right? We know from the data and the research that if, specifically for poor and minority kids, if they have 3 highly effective teachers in a row versus 3 ineffective teachers in a row, it can literally change their life trajectory, right? Their probability of graduating from high school, going on to college, et cetera, changes dramatically. So say, for example, I said, Olivia, you got to take one for the team. I'm sorry. Suck it up in this person's classroom, right? What if Olivia and her classmates the next year were unlucky enough to get another ineffective teacher? Are we willing to sacrifice 2/3 of the kid's chance in life so that we can professionally develop 2 adults? I'm not saying the answer is right or wrong. I'm just saying those are the kinds of questions that we have to be asking ourselves every day and the dilemma that we were in. So that was what we faced every day. And it was a culture that was almost allergic to accountability, one that people did not take personal responsibility for what we were supposed to be doing for children every day. And so I learned a tremendous amount. And I'd say if I had to sort of sum up my learnings in a couple of points, they would be this. The first is that one of the best pieces of advice that I got in my whole 3 years came from Joel Klein, who was the chancellor of schools in New York City at the time. And he actually, he was the one who told Adrian Fenty to hire me, so he kind of got me into the whole mess. So he would routinely call me and, are you okay, And so Joel Klein calls me one night, I'm driving home, it's raining, it's dark, and I see that it's him, so I pull over on the side of the road, and he says, Michelle, I have 2 pieces of advice for you. So I pull over and I say, okay, what are they? He says, the first one, do you have a boyfriend? And at the time I didn't, so I said, no. And he said, okay, go out and get one. And I said, sir? And he said, because this job is the loneliest job you could possibly have. You get beat up every single, you need somebody at home where you can come home to every night who will say, baby, you're not crazy, they're the crazy one. You're good, right? So if you don't have that kind of support, you're never going to go find yourself. You get on one of those dating websites, do what you got to do. So never in my life did I think I'd be getting love life advice from Joel Klein, but there it was. And then I said, but what about the second piece? And he said, you have to lead from the front. And he said it so definitively that I said, thank you, sir. And I hung up the phone. And I said, I have no idea what that means. But I was too embarrassed to ask for clarification. And it actually wasn't until a few months later where we're going through the school closure process that I actually understood what he meant. Because when we were closing schools, people went nuts. We announced that we were going to close 23 schools in 1 year. It was 15% of the schools in the city. I mean, it was a very emotionally charged and sensitive issue. And day after day, sort of, I'd get beat up at these community meetings. Don't do this, don't do that. They're picketing in front of my office and that sort of thing. And it was interesting because after all was said and done, and we actually did close the schools despite a lot of political backlash, about a year after we closed the schools, a woman came up to me and she said, do you remember me? Recognize me? She's like, I was always yelling at you during the school close. I was like, oh, I know who you are. And she said, I just want to say you did the right thing. She said, I couldn't see it at the time. I didn't realize it because we were so emotional about it. But we're now in a school that is a better school and that it is better resource because we were able to close the schools, took the same amount of money, put it towards fewer schools. We were able, for the first time in the history of Washington, D.C., to make sure that every school had an art teacher, a music teacher, a PE teacher, a librarian, a nurse, and a counselor social worker. So the moral of the story is they couldn't necessarily see it at the time, but when you know that what you're doing is right, you can't get mired in sort of all of the back and forth. You have to know, okay, sometimes you have to be out in front. When you do the right thing, you'll get the right results, and people will see that as time goes on. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson is that you have to be okay with not being liked. And I am really good at this one right now. So I can tell you firsthand. It was interesting when during my first year, when I was getting a lot of flack about the actions that I was taking, I went to a conference, and this very high-ranking official from the Democratic Party came up to me and he said, Michelle, I have some unsolicited advice for you. And I said, okay, bring it on. And he said, you have to soften up. Soften, soften, soften. He said, you're so hardcore all the time, and you're talking about the statistics and the data and the 8% thing. He said, when you talk about the bad things, Michelle, people feel bad. And people don't want to feel bad, Michelle. They want to feel good. So if you would just soften up a little bit, then you would get so many more people behind you in your efforts. And I looked at him and I said, I totally disagree. I said, I think the problem in public education is we've been too soft. We've refused to talk about the shortcomings and the failures. We always focus on the good things that are happening, and therefore it's masking the problems that we face every day. What is happening to the children in our school district is criminal. Yes. And we have to put that out in public. And if by doing that, we make people feel a little uncomfortable, but we also create a sense of urgency about the change, then I'm okay with the adults feeling that way for a little while. And then shortly after that, this columnist in the Washington Post wrote this piece on me, and he said, I like Michelle Rhee. She's doing the right thing. She's making the right decisions. The results are good. I just wish she could be a little nicer. As she did it, right? And so I'm reading the piece, and I called the guy afterwards, and I was like, what was that all about? He said, well, I want you to stick around, and I just feel like if you were a little nicer and more accommodating, then maybe, you wouldn't ruffle as many feathers, and then you could be here longer. And I said, look, you've got to decide what you believe the most important characteristics of a school's chancellor are. And if you think friendly and nice and accommodating are the right things, then honestly, you should be advocating for my ouster. Because if you want warm and fuzzy, I am not your girl. But if you like the results and you know we're doing the right things, then what you should be focusing on in the column is telling the adults, you know what? Let's put our egos and our personalities aside as adults and focus on the fact that good things are happening for the children. So you've got to be willing, I think, to be a little, unpopular and know that in the long run, change, everybody says they want change until the change actually starts to occur. And then you get a tremendous amount of pushback. My last point is this, which is that you have to have leaders with courage. And that's actually not me. I didn't require a whole lot of courage. I had the ability to kind of do whatever I did. The courageous person in our dynamic was our mayor, Adrian Fenty, who backed me 100% the entire time that I was in office. And I remember just a few weeks before the election, the primary election in D.C., I came to him and I said, sir, we have a little situation here. So we just implemented our new teacher evaluation system. We have identified over 200 people who are going to be terminated from the system. I realize, though, that this is a politically sensitive time, so if you need to put the brakes on this, just let me know. And he looked at me and he said, does this mean that if we follow through with this, that children will get better teachers in the fall? And I said, yes. And he said, do it. That was the answer I wanted, right? So we did it. And the minute we did it, I mean, my phone started blowing up. People who liked us, who were on our side, calling me saying, have you lost your mind? You cannot fire people weeks before an election. That's political suicide, right? And even to this day, after this man put everything on the line, his entire political career on the line, to do the right thing for kids, somebody asked him the other day, you know, do you have any regrets? And he says, no. He said, I will never do anything more important in my life than the work that we did in those 4 years for the kids of D.C. I wouldn't trade it for anything. We need more political leaders who stand on principle instead of who are licking their finger and figuring out where the political winds are blowing. So that political leadership is an incredibly important part of this. I'm going to end on this note. I believe that public education is supposed to be the great equalizer in our country. It's supposed to be the thing that ensures that it doesn't matter if you're black or white, rich or poor. We have public schools so that every child in America can have an equal shot in life, right? You work hard, you do the right thing, you can live the American dream. That is not the reality for the children in Washington, D.C., the children in Cleveland, the children across this nation. Because in Washington, D.C., if you were born in Anacostia versus if you lived in Georgetown, you got two wildly different educational experiences. That is the biggest social injustice imaginable. Because what it means is that we are still, in this day and age, we are still allowing the color of a child's skin and the zip code that they live in to dictate their educational attainment levels and therefore their life chances and their life outcomes. It's the most un-American thing I think that we can imagine. And it is our obligation, the obligation of every single person in this room, to change that circumstance and make sure that we are living up to our promise as a nation, living up to our obligation to the next generation of young people in this country to ensure that every single child can get an excellent education through a public school system. Thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a special forum featuring Michelle Rhee, founder and chief executive officer of Students First. We will return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. Start formulating your questions now, and we'd ask that you keep them brief and to the point so with that we can get as many questions in as possible. Members and guests alike are welcome to attend City Club forums, and we certainly hope that everyone listening will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Our television broadcast partner is WVIZ PBS IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC, and our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. On Friday, March 25, the City Club welcomes Ratanji Sonde of Discover Help, Inc., and radio personality, who will discuss creating new immigrants. If you wish to make reservations for any City Club program or order a CD or DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or 216-621-0082. Today is the City Club's annual forum on progress, made possible by a generous grant from the Progressive Corporation. We are very grateful for their support. We are also pleased to welcome guests today at tables hosted by the Cleveland Foundation, ePrep School, Forest City Enterprises, the Greater Cleveland Partnership, Ohio Grantmakers Forum, PNC Bank, and Young Audiences. Thank you all for joining us today. We are pleased to welcome students who are here as part of the City Club student program. Participation of these students is made possible by a generous grant from the Fred E. Shaw Foundation, Bernard L. Carr, chairman. With us today are students from the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine, the Cleveland School of Architecture, Early College High School, St. Martin de Porres High School, and ePrep High School. Will our students please stand and be recognized? Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Membership and Marketing Manager Heather Sikora and Program Director Carrie Miller. First question, please.
I'm curious as to the changes that you put in when you were there, if they are still in place or if they've been changed since you've left. And I'm from Akron. We have a STEM school. We have art school. I'm curious as to your thoughts about traditional school districts looking for different ways to meet today's needs.
Sure. So first of all, the very fortunate thing is that when I left the district, I was able to talk my deputy and my entire management team into agreeing to stay at least for the end of the school year. And then last week, my deputy was actually named the permanent chancellor in the school district. So I have a lot of hope for what is possible moving forward. We tried to do our best to ensure that the changes that we were making were really sort of embedded within the district. So, for example, we changed our collective bargaining agreement, and we made that a 5-year agreement instead of a 3-year agreement because we fought really hard for it, and it was a good agreement. We changed legislation and laws around the things that I was talking about central office employees. So, it's not impossible to kind of turn back on those things, but I think we tried to tee it up in a way that it would be more difficult to turn those things around. I think at the end of the day, though, it's really going to rely, and this is what I was talking to earlier, on the mayor and the leadership that he provides, the new mayor. I think he's in a little bit of a precarious position because he was elected through lots of dollars coming from the teachers' unions. They poured $1 million into his campaign. So, he's got to sort of make this balance of kind of, pleasing the people that brought him into office, but then also knowing that there was huge demand to continue the reforms. In terms of I think it's incredibly important for traditional school districts to understand the demand of the marketplace. And that came about in D.C. because we had a very, very strong and vibrant charter school community. And by the time I left, about 40% of the school-age children in Washington, D.C. were attending charter schools. And a lot of the reason when I talk to parents, they would say, well, we're choosing this school or that school was because of programs like a foreign language program at the elementary level or a fine arts magnet, that sort of thing. And so that's part of what we tried to replicate within the district is, the fine arts programs, the world languages and culture programs, the STEM programs, the things that parents and kids found really compelling about either private schools or charter schools, we tried to replicate in the district as well.
Hi, my name is Philip Williams. I'm from St. Martin de Porres, and our saying is transforming one Cleveland urban student at a time. And my question was, what can students do to help education reform?
So I think that students can play a huge role in the reform effort. And in fact, I would say that students and student voice is the thing that is most undervalued in school districts. So I had what I called a student cabinet, and it was a group of students from every single high school in the city was represented, and they came and met with me every 3 weeks or so, and we would talk about policy issues. And it was very interesting because, for example, when we put together our new teacher evaluation system, we rolled it out to the student cabinet, and we kind of said, okay, here's what it looks like, here's what it's going to measure. And what the kids said to me was, well, here, one thing that you're not taking into account is our point of view about teacher quality. Because I've seen your little evaluators come in and then, the teacher perks up and does a whole lot of things that they weren't, they've never done before. We see them every day. And we can tell you there are tremendous numbers of great teachers in the system and some, not so good. But because we see it every day, we can actually evaluate that better. So we put in place a pilot program for this year where we would actually get student feedback and input and triangulate that with the teacher evaluation data. In the interim, a study by the Gates Foundation came out a few months ago that said that they did this research, and they showed that how the students were rating teachers were very highly correlated to student achievement levels. So I actually think we have to spend more time talking to our students and getting their viewpoints and actually incorporating their insights into what we're doing every day. And if it's not happening proactively, then your job is to demand it.
Ms. Rhee, you fired hundreds of experienced teachers in Washington, D.C., and many of the younger teachers who came during your tenure and in the last year of Clifford Janey's tenure have left the district. I know you claim teacher firings brought significant rise to test scores, although I also know that NAEP score gains during your and Clifford Janey's tenures were roughly equivalent, and that the racial achievement gap did not narrow during your tenure. Now, a lot of research demonstrates that we need a climate of trust and community among teachers in schools, and we need 3.5 million teachers to educate 50 million children. How do you propose to inspire young people to become teachers with an education policy strategy that blames and scapegoats teachers for many of our society's greatest injustices?
So there's a lot of stuff, and I could talk for an hour about all of it, but let me be clear about a few things. I do not attribute the gains that we made to the fact that we fired veteran teachers, because I fired a whole lot of new teachers too. I fired ineffective teachers, and some of them were new, and some of them had been there for 5 years and 10 years, and it wasn't about whether they were veteran or new, it was about whether they were effective or not. And so it was a focus on effectiveness that led to our need to remove some employees from the school district. And let me be frank in saying that when I came into the district, and like I said earlier, 8% of the 8th graders were on grade level in mathematics. When you looked at the performance evaluations of the adults in the system at the same time, you would have seen that 95% of them were being rated as doing a good job, great job. How can you have a system where all of the employees, all the adults are running around thinking, I'm doing good work, I'm great, I'm excellent, when in fact what we're producing for kids is 8% success? You cannot run an effective organization in that way. You have to have some alignment between how we're evaluating the adults in the system and what results we're producing for kids. You cannot have a system that is that misaligned. But it's about a focus on on results. I don't scapegoat teachers. What I do is say that everybody has to bear their responsibility. And what the research is very clear about is that in terms of in-school factors, teacher quality is the #1 determinant of student success. It is, and if you're a parent, you know this because you live it every day. Your kid, whether they have a great year or a not so great year, it is very highly correlated to the quality of teacher that they have in their classroom. This is not scapegoating teachers. This is saying this is the value of teachers. This is how important teachers are to this society. And we have to get to a place where, because right now I think we're in a dangerous place in society. And that place is that if you question current policies, if you confront the teachers union, then you get labeled as anti-teacher and union buster. I'm not anti-teacher. I love teachers. I want to pay effective teachers a whole lot of money. I want to recognize them and reward them and value them for the work that we're doing. We put in place a pay system where now if you are an effective, highly effective teacher, you're teaching in a high need school and in a high need subject area, you can make twice as much money as you were making in the old system. Now that doesn't do everything, but it starts to make a difference in the profession overall. But we are never going to attract and retain the best talent in the system until we change the culture of the profession. And as long as we have a profession where when layoffs come, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you are the last person in the door, you are the first person out the door. That policy makes no sense for kids whatsoever. Right? I mean, just be honest. The last in, first out policies are very, very clear. The research is very clear that when you do that, it has 3 detrimental impacts. Number 1, you end up firing some of your most highly effective teachers in the district. Why would you want to have a policy where you knew that some of your best teachers were going to have to go? Number 2, it means that you actually have to lose more jobs and disrupt more classrooms and lose more teachers because the junior teachers are paid the least. So in order to make up the budget deficit, you have to fire more of them. And then the third is that it disproportionately negatively impacts the lowest performing schools because they largely have the largest number of new teachers. So the schools in the more affluent areas with stable staffs, they're virtually untouched by budget cuts. And then schools in the inner city core are decimated by the budget cuts. So for those reasons, it's clear that those kinds of policies don't help children. They are not good policies for the adults either. Teachers don't think that those policies make sense either. So we have to think about how we're going to change the culture of the profession to value people for the work that they're doing every day with kids, and that's how we're going to recruit more of them in. And last, on the NAEP scores, actually, while it's true that in terms of the number of percent, the points that went up on the NAEP score between when I was in office and when Cliff Janey was in office, the difference is that in the prior years, DC's gains actually lagged, were not above what the nation overall gained. The difference in the gains that we saw in the first 2 years that I was there was that while the nation remained flat, we gained significantly. In fact, we led the nation in gains in both reading and math at both the 4th and 8th grade level. We're the only jurisdiction in the country in which every single subgroup of children increased their academic achievement levels. We went from being the last to actually leading the nation in gains, which we didn't get to where we need to be in terms of a finish line, but that was tremendous progress comparatively.
Hi, I was wondering, how long did it take to see the improvements in the schools, and what steps can we take towards improving the schools in Cleveland?
So I think that one of the positive things about the experience that we had in DC is that what we were able to show is that you can actually see pretty massive improvements very quickly. Now again, by the time I left, we had not accomplished everything that we had hoped to at the outset. We were nowhere near being a great district yet, but we were able, for example, to take our elementary math scores from about a quarter of the kids being at proficiency to about half. So we nearly doubled the percentage of kids who were proficient, which is a tremendous gain, even though only 50%, only half of the kids were proficient. So, I think that what we saw was that the gains are possible, but only under the right circumstances, right? So only when you're willing to be as aggressive as we were about the change, and one of the important things about this was our governance structure. So we have mayoral control of the schools, but it wasn't just any kind of mayoral control. We did not have a school board, either elected or appointed, who played any kind of role. And this was important because when I talk to my colleagues across the country about their dealings with school boards, they'll tell me that 60-70% of their time is spent managing the school board and jockeying for votes and how am I going to get 7 people to agree to this, that, or the other thing. When I wanted to enact a policy, I went to the mayor and said, "Sir, this is what we want to do," and he'd say, "Great." It was the most efficient process ever. So the work is hard enough, right, without all the bureaucracy. When you add all the bureaucracy in, it actually just slows things down. It doesn't mean that it's not possible to see, sort of incremental change, but it does slow things down. And, from my perspective, our kids just couldn't afford to wait. In terms of what Cleveland needs, I don't think it's any different from what most struggling urban school districts need. You need a very, very strong leader who has a vision for what needs to happen. That person needs the political backing and the resources necessary to enact that. You need a very strong system of accountability in place. You need high standards, and you need great talent. You need great administrators. You need great teachers. You need great people in the central office. And as long as those sort of building blocks are in place and you're sort of pursuing these things aggressively, then I think Cleveland could very easily come to the forefront of public education reform.
Yes, good afternoon. The information available for data comparison and analysis of the performance of school districts across the country is quite voluminous. And I'd like to know, in your personal opinion, what do you think is the best comparison of school district performance?
So the quick answer to that is there's not great nationwide data available. And part of the problem that we have is that there are 50 states with 50 different sets of standards and 50 curricula, right? And then you've got all these school boards of over 1,000 school boards, each making their own decisions about policies and what textbooks they're going to use, et cetera. And so you can't actually do great apples-to-apples comparisons looking at state tests, because now there's even a perverse incentive to to lower the cut score for proficiency so that it looks like the state's doing better than it actually is. The best thing that we have out there is actually the NAEP examination, which is a national gold standard exam. The issue with that is that the TUDA, which is the urban district portion of the NAEP examination, is not taken by every urban school district across the country. So we were one of, maybe a few more than a dozen, maybe 20 districts, and that list is growing, but there are still the vast majority of urban districts across the country who don't participate in the TUDA, which means that we don't have those national apples-to-apples comparisons.
Okay, there's a lot of talk about how do we bring the lowest performing students in America up to the start line or even to the middle. In terms of the country's goal of how do we impact and become more competitive with the world, I'm curious as to, in addition to teacher effectiveness, what other factors do you think need to be in place to move the country forward in terms of our education system and its outcomes?
I think that's a great question, and people may not love my answer on this, but here I go. We have to change the culture of this country because we have gone soft. I mean, soft. So I'll give you an example of this because it starts with our kids. I have two little girls. They are 12 and 8, and they play soccer. They suck at soccer. They're no good, whiffing the ball and this kind of thing because they take after their mother. But if you were to go into their rooms today, you would see medals and trophies and ribbons. You would think that I am raising the next Mia Hamm, right? So I'm trying to tell my kids, you're not so good at soccer, honey, right? I can't, in order to get good, you have to practice every single day. And even if you do that, I can't tell you that you're ever going to be all that good. But it's very hard for them to square that up against seeing, all these medals, and I'm great, And so part of what we have to do is sort of think about what are we instilling in our children? Are we creating a society where we're celebrating mediocrity? And people are they're pleased with that because I'll tell you, in South Korea, which is where my family's from, and I went to school there for a year, I was shocked. There were 70 kids in a class when I went there, and everyone was ranked from 1 to 70. You knew exactly where you stood. This starts in kindergarten, right? So if you were number 17, your mother was like, why aren't you 16? And then 14, and everybody, and even number 1 is not satisfied because they're looking behind them like, oh my God, number 2 is coming up, right? So the Korean people are not competing with other, there's something about the culture overall that sort of breeds that competition and that constant sort of desire to get better. And I feel like we have to regain America's competitive spirit. Since when I would never have guessed that we would have been okay looking at our PISA results, which are the international comparisons, and knowing that we are 25th in the world in math. Because if we were 25th in the world in the gold medal count in the Olympics, people would go ballistic. Okay, and then there would be a commission about how are we going to get up in the medal rankings and all this kind of stuff. Because we are actually a competitive. That is part of who we are. I think we just lost a piece of it, and we have to recapture it.
I'm a member of a StudentsFirst affiliate in Hudson, Ohio. We've got a couple members here, and we've been trying to network in Ohio with other StudentsFirst organizations. There's a bunch of them. We've got 50 members. What does StudentsFirst plan to do to support grassroots efforts, which are very important in Ohio? They've started change at the state level, but we need to do it more locally. Do you have plans to support us?
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the organization's key priorities, is taking advantage of the fact that I think that there's a groundswell, a desire out there, a latent desire that hadn't been tapped into yet, of people who are tired of the status quo. They know the public schools aren't working for our kids, and they want to do something about it. And that's why we started as a membership organization, and we said we're going to get 1 million members within our first year, because we know that unless we have people who are willing to go to the school board meetings and write their legislators and do all the things that the other influencers and interest groups out there do, then we're not going to ever be able to push a Kids First agenda. And so basically organizing and mobilizing our grassroots membership is going to be a key part of what we do moving forward.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Cleveland.
Thank you.
Understanding that the core strategy of your engagement in Washington, D.C. focused on effective teachers and building effective buildings, I was wondering, do you see a role, or what is your position with regards to the social-emotional and or cultural competency components that's relative in closing the achievement gap?
So I think that it is incredibly important to understand the needs that many students come to school with every day that don't allow them to be as school ready as we would ideally want them to be. Those are incredible challenges. We need to understand them. We need to address them. I think the problem in urban public education today is that oftentimes those circumstances have been used as an excuse for why kids can't achieve. And I had a fascinating conversation with a friend of mine in D.C. a few weeks ago where he said that he lives in D.C., but his people live in North Carolina. So he said that his grandniece was having some problems at the school, so he calls the school and, to find out what's going on. And the school said, she got in some trouble, and we are not going to allow her to come back until her mother comes in to the school. And my friend said, you know what? You don't want my niece to come into the school. Because if she comes in, she's going to fight somebody, and then you're going to have to call the cop. You don't want her to come to school, right? But are you going to abdicate your responsibility for educating my grandniece? Because if your ability to educate her, your willingness to educate her, is dependent on her mother's, actions, you might as well tell this 9-year-old to drop out of school right now, right? And I think that's the important thing that we often lose sight of, is that we cannot subjugate children to lower expectations and a lower quality education over something that they cannot control, which is what their parents decide to do or not do every day. So should we go out and foster more parental involvement? Absolutely. Does it matter? 100%. We should do all of those things, but at the end of the day, we can't hold kids captive to that. We have to say that despite every single one of those obstacles, we're still going to hold ourselves responsible for ensuring that you get a great education.
Thank you. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to Michelle Rhee, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Students First. Thank you, Ms. Rhee. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.